I don't know which one to choose.
It'd be probably the MacBook Pro microphone.
No, that's the built-in microphone.
Oh. Is there no USB output on this thing?
There could be. I didn't look.
USB right here.
Oh. Do you want to try that? Do you have a USB A to C?
I don't have A to C. I have A to B.
And then we need a way to get from B to A.
What's this guy here?
Yeah, that's one of the presenters.
No, don't worry, I won't talk about this guy.
Anyone got a USB A to C adapter? This is the right crowd, right?
Yeah. I might.
Of course, Jared has one.
I have it on my code signing. That's a.
Yeah, that's
Okay. Yeah.
Let's see how this goes.
You have 4 USBs.
I have 3. That's the right number.
Should just pop.
Okay, check. Oh, there we are. No audio, even face.
Allow. Oh, and we're also broadcasting audio right now. Okay. Studio Live 16. Yep, well, I just tapped a mic, and it looks like we're broadcasting. So if anyone's actually watching this right now, we're still eating and just hanging around, but we're going to come back soon.
All right. How are we? Is it? Okay. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the November 19th Toronto Mac and Min. It's probably the last one for the year. My name is Alan Lee. I am one of the planning committee members of the Toronto Mac and Min channel. And today's theme is I did a thing. So it's kind of like the meme I made this, but we wanted to kind of have an open forum and really appreciate the speakers, spend their time making the slideshows and presenting the really cool thing that they did. So we have Rob, we have Chris, we have Joe, and we have Cameron here to speak about a couple of things. So welcome. Just a quick call out that this is, we do have a YouTube channel, so for those who can't make it, this will be kind of available to them to kind of view. Wanted to thank Jamf for their lovely support for the food for tonight, so really appreciate all the support. Also Apple, just in general, for giving us jobs and devices to manage and all that jazz. Here's the quick agenda for tonight. We did a welcome. We're going to quickly go over the code of conduct, quickly go over something like, hey, who's hiring? And here are the topics that we're going to talk about. Using Ansible to replace ARD with, apologies, Roy. Google App Scripts with Chris, Okta, and AI automation for Joe, and AI stuff with Cameron. So this is the code of conduct. I thought this time we would just put the summary of the Mac and Min on the GitHub page. I'm not going to go through them all. I just want to kind of showcase that, like, hey, this is a really cool community. This is a really cool kind of forum that we're here, and we're all here to learn, and it's a safe space. So we're all in different kind of stages of our lives, our careers, in terms of expertise. So the whole point of this specific talk is for folks to share what they've learned and for us to learn. And if you have any questions or concerns about how things are running, or if you have any comments, talk to one of the Toronto Mac and Min administrators. Put up your hand, please. We're all here. Adam, that's me. Adam, Audrey, Dimitri. Some folks aren't here today, but and Jim and Nathan. Just a quick call out, anyone hiring or anyone thinking of hiring for new roles? Chris.
We just posted an IT lead position, which is a senior plus IC for my new company, Relay Financial. Small team, growing really quickly as a company, great culture, really good time. Come work with me. If you have any questions, I'll put up a QR code during my talk, and I'll be around later if you want to know anything else.
Great. Thank you for that. Anyone else? Chris is a great guy, by the way, so I'd love to work with him. Anyone else? Okay. So on to the first topic. So see, I got Rob right here, so I don't know why. I want to fix that, but sorry about that.
Except you've got a bigger one. Yeah. Oh,
It can dongle.
you can dingle?
If it has to. Okay, good. Awesome. Oh, yeah. All right, thanks.
And for questions, raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you, because otherwise the people on the stream won't be able to hear you. And also for people who are hard of hearing in the room.
Okay. Hi, my name is Rob Roy. I'm talking to you tonight about replacing ARD with Ansible. I work for Sheridan College in Oakville. We are the largest art school in Canada, if you're not familiar with who we are. We have about 1,400 Macs that we manage, And we were recently awarded the status of becoming, I think, the only high ed Apple Distinguished School in the country. So we're quite proud of that fact. We've been longtime Apple users. So that's about us. So replacing ARD with Ansible. So we'll talk about where is ARD now, what is Ansible, what are playbooks, which are kind of key to making this work well. How do we use these tools dynamically? And there'll be some demos, willing throughout the presentation. So before I get started, who here still uses ARD? There are people still using it? Okay. Has anybody here used Ansible before? Couple? Okay. With Macs? Yeah, no. Okay. So that's good, because hopefully you'll all get something out of the presentation tonight. So I want to caveat this with, it's very experimental. I like to take unusual tools and do weird things with them that they're not usually used for. So everything you see here is experimental, so may or may not work for you, but I hope it inspires ideas. You see something here that inspires you to go and do something interesting with the technology as well. So let's talk about Apple Remote Desktop. So this is a tool we've had for a very long time. It was launched in March 2002 under 10.1 Puma. It became version 3, which is the version we're still currently running, in 2006, because it became a universal binary with the launch of the Intel product. And we've just been sticking with version 3.0 since then. We don't really see any updates to it or any new functionality. Our current version is 3.10, which launched only a week or two ago. You can see it's got the beautiful new glass icon with it. So over the last 19 years, there's really been point updates for new OS releases and that sort of thing. And it still costs $79 USD to purchase it. It's not a free tool. So are there issues with it? Yeah, sometimes you'll see issues. So here's a great example. This machine is showing as offline, but if I actually double click, I can connect to the machine and do something with it. And the tasks are stacked. So if you run a task on a bunch of machines, you can't do the next task until that task is finished, right? So you're kind of always waiting in a queue for things to get done. So you can possibly use a tool like Ansible to replace that. So Ansible is an open source command line automation tool written in Python. It's basically used a lot by people deploying Linux and Windows. So say you deploy, a bunch of Linux VMs or a bunch of Linux servers. After the deployment is done, you can run the tool like Ansible to actually configure those machines to be the way that you want them to be, right? So it's designed really as a deployment tool, but today we're going to look at it as a day-to-day maintenance tool instead. So what is it? Really, it's a bunch of command line tools, a bunch of binaries. And we're only going to look at a couple of them today, but this is basically what gets installed when you install Ansible on your machine. You can get it in a few different ways. You can go to the GitHub for Ansible and download it. You can use Homebrew to install it, which is a very easy thing to do on a Mac. You can also use Nix packages, which is another tool management tool that you can actually use on Mac OS, or you can use it through pip or piptex, because it's basically Python is using under the hood to do the work. So what is it really? It is a orchestration tool that uses SSH to do things to a number of machines. So the way you set it up is you create yourself a set of SSH keys on your machine. You keep the private one on your machine, and you copy the public one to all the machines you'd like to control. And now basically you are just sending SSH commands to a number of machines to do the work that you want to have done. At its heart, that's what it is. To use it, you need just two pieces of information for it to work with. One of them is a configuration file that will tell Ansible certain pieces of information it needs to know. And the other one is an inventory of machines you'd like to use Ansible on. So you pre-create these two pieces. The config file, there's not a lot in here that's super necessary. I've pointed these out in red. Hopefully you can see them. So you need to tell Ansible where the inventory is. So that's just a path to the inventory file. You have to tell it where your private key file is, that you have the public key matching on the remote machines. On macOS, or I've noticed you need to actually call out the interpreter being Python version 3. And then to make life easy, you can turn off host key checking and user known host files, because if you're deploying this to a bunch of machines and then you image those machines or change them in some way that the known host key is different, that can be a challenge. So this is an easy way to get around that. So that's all you really need in the configuration file. And then the other file you need is the inventory file. And this is just a file. It can either be INI file or YAML. I've chosen to go INI here because I think it's easier to look at and not as complex for spacing as YAML can be. And what you do in the inventory file is you set up a bunch of preset groups that you can send Ansible commands to. So they could be single machines, it could be a group of machines, but basically this keyword that's in the square brackets is how you tell Ansible which machines you'd like to run the sessions on. So you can see you can put in DNS entries if that's the way you like to work. You can run them as IPs if that's easier for you. You can set up an entire group of machines, put them all together there. And so here we've called it each machine individually with its number. But Ansible has this other way of using it where you can put in mass01 : to 17. And now it understands that you want machine 01 through machine 17. So instead of writing them all out, it will use that information. And lastly, in the inventory file, you can put in variables that are useful to you. So here I've just put the Ansible user that's on all my machines is the local admin, ladmin. So if I put that into this config file or in the inventory here, it knows that for all of those machines. So how do you run it? Well, at the very basic, you start with the Ansible tool. You feed it one of the choices out of your inventory file. So here we're just sending it this one iMac. And then we can send -m, which is the module you'd like to run. And here it's ping. So this is really the SSH command we're sending to it. We just want to ping this machine and make sure it's working. This is kind of the fastest way to test if Ansible is actually working once you've set it up. You just run this one command against a single machine. And this would return the ping if everything was successful. You could also send it, one of our choices in the inventory was the science lab. So now if I do Ansible Science Lab ping, it's going to take those 10 machines that are in the Science Lab and send pings to all those 10 machines and return them to us in one fell swoop, okay? Or you could also do Ansible all. So this will take every machine that's in your inventory and run the command against all of those machines. So that's the very basics of how Ansible works. But that's not very flexible, right? You have to go into the command line every time, type in the machine you want to run, type in the tool you want to run. We want to run the ping command against there. So Ansible has a third document that you can use with it called a playbook. And a playbook allows you to pre-create some recipes, let's say, of things that you'd like to do with Ansible. So here the playbooks are all written in YAML, so they again have to have this very specific syntax. So here we have the name of the playbook, which is reboot machines. We have the host we'd like to apply this against, which is all of our science lab, again, those 10 machines. And then we have a task or set of tasks we'd like to run against that machine. So here our task is rebooting it. It's a shell command we're sending, which is sbin reboot. And then we can use the Ansible playbook tool instead of just Ansible. And now we can feed it the playbook we'd like to run, which is this reboot.yaml. And now that will do that task against that group of machines that we'd like to run it against. So that's, again, not super flexible because we'd have to create one for the science lab, one for the math lab, one for whatever we wanted. So playbooks have the ability to use variables in them. So here, instead of saying that we want the host to be the science lab, we set the host to be this variable we've created called target. And now that gives us the flexibility when we run this again. We can run Ansible playbook. We feed it the playbook we want to run. And we do extra dash vars and set the target to be MATLAB. Now when we run this, it's going to be flexible to the MATLAB. And we run the command again and we say the science lab. So now the playbook's more flexible. We don't have to have that hard-coded in there. We can feed it a variable at runtime to make it useful. So now we've got these three pieces of information. We've got the config file, the inventory file, and probably multiple playbooks that we've built in a folder. So how do we dynamically automate this? Again, we have to run this playbook every time and feed in the specific lab we'd like to run it against or machines we'd like to run it against. So we have information that's useful to us. We have a list of the playbooks we've created. We have the inventory of the machines we'd like to run them on. So how do we automate putting those together? Well, we can do that through a shell script that we can then put a lot of intelligence in the shell script to ask questions to be able to make this incredibly reusable. So here, and don't pay too much attention to the code, but I'm just going to call out the important parts. So when the shell script runs the first time, it says, hey, pick from, we're going to ls the playbooks folder and be able to see all the playbooks that are in there. And because every time the script runs, it does this ls, which would then allow us to pick. If I add a playbook into that folder, or if I delete one, the next time the script runs, it's dynamically telling me what playbooks are available because it's doing an ls command on that folder, right? So the very first thing that the script does when you run it, it says, hey, here's all the playbooks available to you. So I would just go through here and I'd say, oh, I want to, check the SIP status. I just type in 25, and that's the playbook that's going to run for me. Then we say, okay, now we know which playbook we want to use. At what machines do we want to run this against? So again, I'm just creating a variable here, and I'm basically going through that Ansible inventory file, and I'm doing a sed to cut out the all vars. And basically, when it goes through that file, it's going to now create a list of math labs, science lab, VM labs test, right? Everything inside the square brackets. So I've just gone through this text file, pulled out those, and created a list of those specific things. And after I've done that, I've created that list, then I add a single machine to the end of that list. So I could go through and just do this on one independent machine instead of an entire lab of machines. So when the script gets to this point, it's gone through that text file, figured out what I want to use, and gave me the single machine as the sixth option. And so now I could choose whichever one of those collections, or I could say, hey, I'd like to run a single machine, and then I just type in the front part of the DNS, because the script will add on the rest of the domain. So once I do that, I can just run it on a single machine. So let's do a little demo of this working. So on the left-hand side here, I just have my terminal open. I'm in the Etsy Ansible directory, which is where my script is. And these are just two VMs that I have available that we can play with. So I make sure I'm in the right place. Oops. It's hard to type and hold the microphone at the same time. Might be better if that's possible. Okay. Because I'm a bit of a touch typist. Sorry for those at home to be making lots of noise here. Okay, can everybody still hear me okay? Yeah. All right. So I've started the playbook picker, which is my shell script. So the first thing up, it's like, hey, what would we like to run? And so of the demos, I'd like to run, let's find out the serial number of these two machines. So if I look through my list here, I can see the serial number is 23. So I just type in 23. And then here I have my list of machines. So the demo pool here is these two machines in front of us. So I just do that, and now it's going to go run this command on these two machines. This is what Ansible looks like when it runs. It tells you it talked to these two machines. Here's the return. You can tell that I've duplicated these VMs. They have the exact same serial number. And then it gives me an OK and tells me that something changed because I looked at the information. If it failed, everything would be in red, and it would be super obvious that it's failed. So let's run it again. And this time I'm going to say, OK, what's the SIP status of these machines? So if I look through there, 25 is the SIP status, and I'm going to run it on these two machines. And again, comes back, yep, we got system integrity protection enabled on both those machines. Last one we'll do is let's send a Unix command. So this is something we would do typically in ARD, right? We could send an individual Unix command. So I'm just going to go LS applications. And it asks now, would we like to run this as root or not? Because I've written that into the shell script. So I'm just going to say this is not root worthy. So I'll say no. We're going to run it on these two machines again. And now it went through, did whatever Unix command we want and return the information to us here. All right. So that's pretty simple stuff, right? We're really just doing a single command at a time to a group of machines. But some of these playbooks that we have here are a lot more complex than that. So things like installing packages, copying files, copying applications. We're going to need a way to pick those things to be able to send them to the remote machines. So I'm going to go through the script to show you how those pieces work. So when the shell script runs, like I said, the very first thing it does is it picks the playbook we'd like to run, and then it picks the machines we'd like to run it on. So once we know the playbook we'd like to run, I can do some if statements in the shell script to say, okay, hey, stop here. If this is the copy application playbook, there's extra stuff we want to do here. And so now I invoke AppleScript because I'm running on a Mac. I could do that. And so in AppleScript, I say, hey, choose a file. And it's going to allow me to go in my hard drive, find the application I'd like to send, and make that part of the script. Then I can say, where would you like to put this on the foreign machine that you're putting it on, right? So here I've got /applications, /users desktop, library management, and there's even an other piece here. And so if I choose other, then it's going to say, hey, what's your path? So I can type in a specific path if I want it to go to a specific place as the script is running. So it makes it really flexible. And then here inside the playbook, we've got our initial target variable that we talked about before. So that's what we're setting to whatever machines we'd like to send it to. And now we have a source and a destination because we just asked, what are you sending? That becomes the source. We asked, where do you want to put it? /applications. That becomes the destination. And then because it's an application, usually they're owned by Rootwheel. So we could do a chown at the end to the destination and the name of the app that we're copying over there. So it gives us a lot more flexibility. Same thing if we want to copy a file, right? Open up AppleScript, tell me, choose a file. Where do I want it to go? But here, because this is just a file, it's not an application where we know it probably wants to be Rootwheel. So what would you like the permissions to be? So it's going to ask you, hey, what would you like the permissions to be? So you type in Sheridan staff 777. And then when it drops that on the remote machine, it's going to permission it properly for that. So same thing here. We've got target we're sending it to, a source to destination, and now we've got a chown. We want to chown it to the owner in this group, and we've got a chmod. And here's the POSIX we just sent, 777, and away it goes. So let's demo those. So we'll run the script again, and here we're going to say copy application, which is number 7. And it's just going to pull up this picker. So I'm going to grab something. What's interesting here? Chess. It's going to be on the other machine. I'll go with Brave. It takes a few seconds longer, but we'll go with it. And over here, I'm just going to open up the application folders so we can see. And so where do we want to put it? Well, we're going to throw it in application. So I'm going to choose one for that. And then we're going to send it to these two machines. And so now in a few seconds, you're going to see Brave browser start to show up and deploy to these two machines. There it goes. So very easy way, all dynamic, all happening when you run the script. So I'll move on with those guys. You keep an eye on that. You'll see them. Well, actually, we still have to wait for the task to finish. So this will be just a few seconds. Are there any questions so far while we're going through? No? Sure, yeah.
Are you using this in replacement of an MDM?
Not typically as a replacement for an MDM, but it could be. A lot of times, in our business, we have a lot of lab machines, which means that we've got machines with no dedicated user to them. And so this just gives a lot of flexibility to do a one-off job that, maybe is a little faster than more flexible than the MDM could deploy. That's maybe why we'd use it. Yeah.
And the other part of that, was your choice of Ansible over like SaltStack or Puppet a specific reason for Ansible over the other ones?
Yeah, that's a good question. I just was playing with Ansible and said, hey, what can I do with this tool while I'm playing with it? Yeah, that's basically. Because, there probably are a lot of other tools that would do a similar thing. So there you can see Brave browser copied over there. We got our OKs, which meant it went well. So let's copy a file this time. So we're going to do copy file, which is number 8. Same thing, we get a picker up. So here's our file. It's just a text file. I'm going to throw it on the desktop, which is number 1 here. And I'm going to say, yeah, let's make this owned by Sheridan, staff 777. And we're going to run it on those 2 machines again. So if I go over here, here's our text file that was just copied over. And if I check permissions on it, oops. And there we go. Oh, for some reason, okay. It made a liar out of me. Because those permissions are not what I sent it. Illegal username. Oh, is that what it was? Oh, yeah, you know what? It should be LAdmin, not Sheridan. Sorry. All right, let's run. Anyway, yeah, if I put in LAdmin, which I should have, then it would have come up with the exact permissions that we wanted to. Okay. And the last one is let's install a package. So if we look at install package, that's number 11. And I've got this NDI tools installer. And same thing, we just like to install that on these 2 machines. And then again, if I come down here, then you'll see the NDI tools start to show up. Right, there they are. All right, so that's all those demos.
Sorry, so
Yep.
when you're running one of those scripts, could you obviously run another one
Yeah.
at the same time?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Limitations were.
So I'm actually using, if you notice here, I'm actually using iTerm2, which allows you to open another tab or another window and do more. If you're using the Apple terminal, it will not. Yeah, you're stuck with a single thread. But if you open up iTerm2, you can do multiple at the same time. Thank you for asking that. Yeah.
And then I guess one other question then, did you just run up against some things that ARD couldn't do?
No, so everything we've seen so far is stuff that ARD has done. That was basically my template. I said, okay, I went through all of the, the tools
built-in Unix commands.
Yeah, and all the things that I've ever done as an administrator to manage my Macs. And I went through and I said, okay, can I replicate all these? And that was my template for that. So there might be, I haven't really thought about it, but there's maybe things, because it's anything that a shell, could do basically is available to you here through SSH.
Yeah.
So there might be things you couldn't do. Yeah. So far, no, okay. So then the question becomes, what if you need to have super user capabilities, right? If you need to run sudo on a remote command. Well, that's where the become command comes in. So you can actually send commands to be run as root on the remote machine. So to use become, you add it to the playbook. You just put in this dictionary pair, become is true. And you could either do it per task or for the full playbook. So this first example here, I said it's in the playbook, right? I said become true at the very top, and now every task is going to be run as root. Or in this other example, I just needed a couple pieces. The initial copy I didn't actually need to run as root, but to actually install the package, I needed to run it as root. So you have those 2 choices when you put it into your playbook. So then how do you authenticate that? Well, there's 2 options for that as well. So you can either prompt for the sudo password when you run the playbook. So in my script, if I put in the -K, capital K flag, when I ran this, I would then be prompted in the shell to put in my sudo password that's going to run on the remote machine. Or you could pipe it in, essentially. You take your playbook and then you do --become --become password file, and you point it to a plain text file that has the password in it. Doesn't sound very secure, but it's one way to do it. You can, limit the readability to you only, so that nobody else has access to see it. There is a tool in Ansible called the Ansible Vault, which is a way to encrypt the file that would have the password in it, which sounds amazing, and it is, but now you have to unlock the vault, which means you have to give it a different password to unlock the vault every time you run it. Yeah, question?
Well, with the with the Ansible Vault, you could actually have it run a script to get the password. So,
Yeah.
like for example, if you're using it in Linux, you could call it key vault and have it just on the machine identity.
Okay.
So you can actually pass that password via a script. So it's encrypted, and the password itself is stored somewhere safe.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that addition. That's great. So that's Become, right? So that gives you that kind of flexibility to run things as super user. So that basically covered, most of the things that ARD did, but there are still some really kind of custom things that ARD does that aren't covered here yet. And so I really worked hard on making these ones work. First one is lock mode. So when you're in ARD, you could take a remote machine and lock it so that the user sitting in front of it can't actually do any work. Well, luckily, Tim Perfit at Two Canoes has a tool here called curtain mode, which is kind of beta. You have to look around for it, which is why I put the URL in here. And it basically does the same thing. It will give a locked instance to the person on the other end. If you'd like to observe machines, so in ARD you could take 20 machines, hit observe, and you're going to see basically like a thumbnail of all the machines. At a glance, you just see what they're all doing and what state they're in. So this is the most complex playbook I've made yet. And sorry this is so small, but I'll talk about what they are as we go through each one of them. So what it does is it sends to all the remote machines you'd like to see a screen capture request, which is going to basically just take a JPEG of whatever's on the screen and throw it into the temp folder. Then we take all those screenshots from these remote 20 machines, copy them locally to my machine. And then we can, I go through those and count them basically. I'm using the WC command with lines to just determine how many pictures are in this folder. And you'll see here there's a delegate to localhost. So that means although this Ansible playbook is running, now it's doing things on my machine, not on the remote machine. Because now that I've copied all those JPEGs locally, I just want to count them locally and do the processing work on them locally. So you have that ability to do that. Then I go through and I basically just do a count of the number of images, and then I determine the size I'd like it to, and I shrink them all so they would all fit within that size. I resize them all in this command. I add a name on each JPEG, so I know which machine that this was. And then I basically concatenate all of those into one shot, and then I open that shot. And this is basically what you would get. So here I've only got the 2 machines, but you see it's taken them, shrunk them down so I could see both of them as large as they could be for their size, and I've put labels on them. So when I look at it, I know which machine is doing what at this exact moment. You do have to, of course, give a privacy profile to this because using screen capture on somebody's remote machine, not something you would normally be able to do. Again, because we have lab machines, we have the ability through our MDM to do things like that. And then the last one probably is streaming a workstation. So you could observe one workstation kind of up close. Here we're just using VNC to do that job, right? We pick the machine we want and we look at it that way. And then the last one this was I think probably the hardest one of all the ones that I was trying to do to kind of cover everything ARD did, and that was the ability to chat with a remote machine. So for us, if we have students having trouble, they could ask us through the chat and we can respond to them. And so what I did is I used Netcat, which basically is like a reverse tunnel. So I go to their machine. I go to my machine and set up Netcat to receive. I go to their machine and say Netcat send. And basically it dials them back from their machine into me, and we start a text conversation through the shell. We'll see this live in a second. That took a lot of custom work because trying to do all those commands took this mess to get it all working right. So I just want to point that out. That was not an easy one. So let's demo those things. So first of all, let's clean up these a little bit. So we will do lock mode on. So if I type in number 12 here for lock mode on, and we can add a saying on the lock screen so the student is aware of what's going on. So now the two strings you should see here lock in a second. And if the resolution was better, you would see it would have that. We are doing software updates right now on the same screen. And we can go back and do lock mode off to open that back up. And those should go away. There we go. Now streaming. So I go to Stream Workstation, which is number 30. And here I want to do a single machine. So I type in 7, and this is going to run on Lab 01. And so now it's basically going to launch a VNC session to that machine. And then we should have the ability to control it. I'm not sure why everything is so slow because I brought my own network for this. There we go.
The screen sharing, is that using, my question was just
Yeah,
answered.
it's using Apple
Once you-
screen sharing. Yeah.
Perfect.
Basically, when you use the VNC :// it's going to launch screen sharing and just connect you to that one machine. And now we have that covered there. And the last one is let's try a chat and see how well this is going to go. So chat is number 4, and we'd like to run it on, again, we'll have to use a single machine here. So we'll go Lab 01. And so like I say, it's going to launch a local terminal here. You'll see actually Apple's terminal show up here. And it's going to start the Netcat session where we're listening on our local terminal. And then it should open the remote terminal on the other machine. You know what? I've got a canned version of all these things just in case. So let's do that. Be much more exciting. All right. So here we're going to run the chat command. We're going to send it to the single machine again. And so now you see it's launched the terminal on our side. It's launched the terminal on the remote side. And it typed in the terminal, hello, this is the MacTech team. How can we help you? And they say, help, my computer is on fire. And that came back to us, right? It shows that it came from the student, help, my computer is on fire. And I say, pour water on it, which would then return to them. Yeah. So that's how chat could work. So it's kind of primitive, but it is a possibility. All right. We'll go back for the rest of the slides. So that's great. What if you're not really a terminal person and you prefer a GUI? Well, I wrote everything again in AppleScript. So you could just go to AppleScript and run the same thing. And it goes through the same playbooks. I say, OK, I want the SIP status for these machines. And I want to run it against these 2 demo machines. And then there we go. Sorry about the speed. It's usually much faster than that. But we get the same thing here, right? We get our system integrity protection enabled. So it is possible to do it from AppleScript as well. OK, that's a good answer. What if you don't run Mac OS? Well, you could also do it from Linux, because I wrote that too. So same thing here. We just run our playbook. We'll do the same thing. Maybe we'll do serial number this time. And the demo machines, same thing. So because it's just a shell script, you can reuse it any number of ways to be useful to you. And again, we get the same information back. And we get some nice color because it's Linux. All right. So that's the dog and pony show. So any questions? Yeah.
Another one.
Sure, Jim.
Is Ansible cloud-based yet? Or is it only internal server?
Yeah, it actually runs as a binary on your local machine. So you're talking directly to all the remote machines.
Well, from
So
machine to machine.
yeah, you're literally going machine to machine. It's reaching out with SSH to every one of these machines and just doing things, in order to the number of machines necessary.
Yeah, because I thought there was always a server component, and then you issue commands to the server, and then the server talks to every agent.
No, in this case, you're going direct from your machine. So my laptop here is just sending the commands directly to those 2 VMs.
Cool.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, Adam?
Similar question. does it only work on a local network?
Yeah.
I was going to go that way too. But
Yeah. Yeah, over VPN. As long as you can target the IP with an SSH, then you could do it. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, through VPN you could easily do that.
I missed this, but like, what is your favorite? Like, one, is this in production? Two, what are the commands that are being used, like by techs or whoever is in charge of that, mostly in playbooks? And I think Casper touched on this. Final question was, like, what are you burning to kind of write as a new playbook? Like, what are the problems you're trying to solve now at Sheridan?
Yeah, so like I say, I went through my ARD, list of things that I had saved as tasks and basically rewrote them all here. So you saw the list was 20 or 30, I think, about. So those were all the things that we kind of did on a regular basis in there. And so I don't have anything new, but something new would take, a couple of minutes to write up in a playbook and work for sure. Yeah. We don't actually run it per se, just because I'm the guy that wrote it, and I actually manage the laptops now, not desktops. So, but it has come in clutch. So one of the things we do, every year we re-image machines still, which everybody sounds like it's probably old-fashioned, but we like to have a clean OS every time we deploy in September. And the way I do that is I take one of the installers, so say like Tahoe installer, and I put that onto inside of a DMG, and I mount that on a web server. And so what I do is, like, on every machine here, I mount that DMG locally, and I just run the installer with whatever flags I need to run it with. And I got to a point a couple months ago where I couldn't do that any other way, and then this saved the day, and I could actually use Ansible to do that job. So.
Because you want a specific OS instead of like leveraging MDM and ADE and DEP?
Yeah, I mean, now we have the erase all content and settings, which would give you the OS you're running back. But we like to clean and, basically every September we roll up to whatever the next OS is, and we keep it that way for the entire year. So it's just a quick way for us to, because when you do that command, you can choose to wipe the disk at that time. You can install extra packages at that time. It's just a clean and fast way for us to re-image a machine to a new OS ready for enrollment into the MDM, and the MDM picks up and does the rest of the tasks at that point.
And I guess like quick follow-up with that is that you could then create it in a way where it's just like the golden image, quote unquote, and just hit one command and it does everything. Yeah,
basically we're just installing the OS through the installer, but the moment it hits the MDM, we still use Monkey, so it connects to Monkey and does all the package installation and that kind of stuff. Yeah, so it's just an easy way for us to have a clean OS, clean known OS on a machine. Yeah, any other questions? No? Okay, well thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob.
Last thing I'll say is I'm not going to post this anywhere, but if you're interested in the code, I'm happy to give it. Just maybe take a screenshot of this and send me an email. I'm happy to share all of this with anybody that wants it. Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Very cool. Thank you. Next up, we got Chris.
Oh, good. No? Okay. I guess.
I'm just going to follow along. Mine's a long
Sorry, stream. Just technical difficulties. We're sorting it out.
Not my technical difficulties.
Throw us under the bus as much as you want.
All right, we ready, everyone? Okay, cool. So I'm going to be talking about automating new hire onboarding using Google App Scripts. This was my first foray into app scripts, and I'll give you a bit of a rundown on everything. So a little bit about context here. I used to work for a company called Wabi. They worked in the autonomous trucking industry, building 18-wheel trucks. They were rapidly growing across Canada and the US. We were starting to build out a number of different bases and locations. Legality around autonomous trucking was tricky in certain states and places like Canada. But when I joined them, they were about 100 employees. When I left them, they had crested 200. So there was a lot of rapid growth in about a year and a few months. So, a little bit about me and my role. When I was working there, I was a senior sysadmin. I was focusing on automation specifically. So trying to figure out how to manage identity and access across different platforms, ensuring efficient workflows that took my work away, and then really focused on building infrastructure as code. We were pretty heavy into Terraform. We used a lot of Ansible. We had a pretty strong Linux environment. So workstations, getting things set up automatically were pretty important to us. So a little bit about Google App Scripts. Has anyone ever used a Google App Script before? I see a few hands. Really cool. So a bit about them. Basically, it's a really powerful tool that's built into Google Workspace automatically. It allows you to run code within Google. I specifically used it within Google Sheets. And it allows you to run items not just within the Google interface, but use REST APIs to call out to different applications. So you can use this as a one-stop shop to perform a ton of different tasks. So examples here, Google App Scripts use JavaScript. I will say ChatGPT was my friend in generating a bunch of JavaScript. But it allowed us to integrate with Google Sheets, Gmail, Drive, Calendar, and call out to other services like Slack, Jira, Bamboo HR, Lever, and you can set triggers. So if you've ever used something like a Rundeck or another automation platform, you can tell it, I want to run at a certain time of day, of week. I want to run it when I click a button that says run, or if you just want to run it when you open a file, that's also possible for yourself as well. And the great thing about this, you don't need to host any infrastructure. Google takes care of all of that on the back end. So from a hosting perspective, you literally just publish your script, you publish your trigger, you're good to go. So what was the problem that I was trying to solve? So we obviously used an HRIS system. This was Bamboo HR, but it had not yet been incorporated into Google Workspace. So when we had new hires who started, we had to manually create all of their accounts, get things set up, invite them manually to their groups depending on their role, communicate this out to various teams. There were a whole bunch of manual tasks when I started, and I candidly thought to myself, this is not very efficient. I'm just doing the same thing over and over and over again. When we were dealing with this onboarding, everything was coming in through a Google spreadsheet. When we hired somebody, I'm going to pick on Alan here, but if we hired Alan, his name would show up on a spreadsheet. And then from there on, everything would be managed through that spreadsheet. It would include all of Alan's details and then give us an idea of their department, their division, where they're located. Are they starting on site? Are they starting remotely? Do I need to ship them hardware? We'd figure everything out, and it was just in the spreadsheet. So this gave us a massive opportunity to say, how can we automate all of this manual stuff? And we've got a great source of truth, which is, in this point in time, a Google Sheet. So what did we do here? Well, I started and I thought to myself, Google App Scripts could be a great option. To be candid with you, when I was working with Google a couple years ago, they were pushing App Scripts on me left, right, and center. And I had told them at the time, I have absolutely no use for this tool. I don't ever see a reason to use it. And then the light bulb clicked when I was working at Wabi, and I said, there might be a potential here. Let me look at this. So use ChatGPT and GitHub Copilot to generate a lot of my scripts. We obviously used Google Sheets for the automation, and I'll show you a bit of that. Within Google App Scripts, you can automatically reference a service account and a custom scope for your item. So we just created a general service account. We gave it the admin scopes that it was needed, and Sheets hosts its own admin SDK. So you literally just link it to your sheet, and then if the role or the account that you need to use has the right permissions, it will just execute it automatically. And we'll talk more about this, but we set up a number of other integrations using Slack, Jira, and Lever, whatever you want to call it. So what was needed to make this happen? Well, I mentioned it already, but we needed the Google Workspace Admin SDK. If we're going to automatically create users, we need permissions in Google Workspace to be able to do that. We'll see shortly, but we use Slack to send out a bunch of notifications about the status of user accounts. So that was, in essence, creating a Slack webhook and a Slack bot that interacted and posted a message to a specific channel. And then from an IT perspective, well, a spreadsheet is great. We obviously like to track things in Jira. We like Jira tickets. So we used the Jira API to generate a token so that when we, again, got notice of a new hire, it would automatically create a ticket in Jira for us. So I mentioned this already, but everything ran through a spreadsheet itself. So I will give you a rundown of that specific spreadsheet in a second, but this was our source of truth. It was great because columns were generalized for state tracking. It was an HR-friendly design. They knew what to do. They added everything to the spreadsheet automatically, and it was the single source of truth across a number of teams, from HR, recruiting, IT. We've all used spreadsheets. We kind of know that they're tried and true. So this is a visualization. This is all just example data, but this gives you an idea of the information that was important. So we saw the user, we saw the laptop type, we saw a bunch of statuses that we would share out automatically. But in essence, it would tell us where the person's working, their department, their manager, if they were employed full-time, when they were starting, their desk assignment. We'd get the information for where to ship their hardware. The laptop type was automatically generated in a secondary sheet based on dynamic information. So we had a list of departments and divisions. If you were in engineering and a specific sub-department, then we'd know, perfect, you need a 16-inch MacBook Pro. That would automatically be set up within the sheet itself. So seems simple, but everything that was needed was stored within the spreadsheet. So if you haven't run App Scripts before, when you're in a spreadsheet, there is an extensions drop down, and the third option is App Scripts. It's literally that simple to launch it for the first time. And it allows you to start to generate scripts and host those scripts, and you can run as many as you want within a single sheet, and you can run them on various triggers. So this is how you pull up an app script if you've never used it before, and you'll notice based on my spreadsheet, we had a whole bunch of columns. Those columns were mapped within a script, so we knew exactly what data to parse. So we'd get your name, your division, your title, your start date. It's all mapped by columns, but the way that the script reads it is actually by the column ID, which is just the number. So, you know, A is 1, D is 4, etc. It just goes onwards from there. So I'd mentioned that we like to use Jira for things. So as soon as a new hire was added, we would look at their start date, and then 14 days before their start date, because sometimes you have hires who we get notice of a couple months in advance, it would automatically create a Jira ticket for us. And it would collate all that data that I just showed you on the previous screen, and it would generate a ticket that we would get saying, this user is starting on site, or this user is starting remotely. Here is their address information. Here is their details. Here are their roles. and the Jira ticket would automatically populate what was needed for us. So from an IT perspective, we weren't being spammed by tickets too early that we could never close, and 2 weeks was a pretty reasonable timeline for us to be able to ship out hardware to an end user, get them onboarded, get them set up for success in that appropriate period of time. And it also gave us some visibility onto the tracking side of things for our own history. We don't know what's going to happen to that Google Sheet data long term, but we know that our Jira ticket history will sort of be there indefinitely. It also gives us as an internal team the ability to see what status we are within that ticket. So really great from a visibility perspective for IT, reading that information, creating the ticket, and when the ticket was created, you may have seen it, but it writes back to the sheet saying that a Jira ticket was processed or created so that the end user or a recruiter knows, okay, IT has this person's information at this point in time. They're ready to get set up. So once the Jira ticket is created, I had another script that actually created the user using that same dynamic data. We would go into Google Workspace. This was all done with an onboarding service account, and it would add all of the user's information. So we knew based on role, if you needed to be added to specific groups. We generally used group-based provisioning for SAML apps within Google. We were like a Google IDP shop in essence. So based on the groups you got added to your applications automatically. It would add in all of the critical information for your first day. So it would capture your personal email address to send you a password reset to. It would capture your manager so that we could scope sort of the appropriate actions to that. Really, it set all the dynamic user attributes that we needed. And then once this was done, it would update, again, that spreadsheet with the user's email address. We had some logic that you'll see if you look at my scripts later, said by default, first initial, last name for email. If user already exists, see if it's the same user who's returning and reactivate their account. But if it happens to be a completely new employee with the exact same name, then go to first name dot last name as another email possibility. So we're trying to cover all of our variables as scenarios there. Yeah. On top of that, once the user's email is created, we then use Slack to send a Slackbot notification to a company onboarding channel. This would notify the recruiting and HR teams that this person is starting on this day. So it would include their date of start. It would include their department and division. So the manager could be notified if needed to be. And then lastly, it would also include their location because we had various locations throughout Toronto and the US. The facilities teams would be notified that X person was starting on X day at X location. And it would also temporarily, if in office, include their desk location. So that facilities person would know, okay, they're sitting at this place. I know what I need to do to get this person up and running on time. So we've created the accounts. We've sent all these automations up. What's next? Well, obviously you're starting on a certain day. So the final script would automatically send you your password reset. We did this in a couple different ways. First and foremost, Friday at 5 p.m., we would send that password reset out to the end user. One of the attributes in that spreadsheet was your personal email address. So it would send a Google password reset to your personal email address. If you've ever gotten one of those, it's not exactly the nicest. It's literally just a Google image that says like reset your password. You've got 24 to 48 hours. So we actually wrote a custom company email that would give them a little bit of a warm welcome saying, hey, welcome, you're starting on Monday. Really excited to have you join. Here's your login information. And we would dynamically set a password based on a bunch of attributes and then send it to the user. At that point in time, this would then write back a password sent status to the spreadsheet. So again, everybody knows the password was successfully sent. But we also know that when you get an email at 5 o'clock on Friday, you may not be looking at that email. And sometimes people let their passwords expire or don't really sign in. So the final portion of this script was that it would actually check on Monday morning at 8 a.m. and say, is this user account still pending activation in Google, or is the account now active? If the account was active, nothing would happen. the user's good to go. But if it was pending activation, that means the email address and password have probably expired. So it would actually send them automatically another password reset email saying, hey, we notice you haven't set up your account yet. You're starting today. You should do this. It's active again for 24 hours. That way, if somebody is starting in a remote location, they have the account that they need to get access to without having to reach out to IT and say, hey, my password expired. Can you reset this again? And it would then update the tracking status with a password sent status ×2, notifying us that they hadn't signed in, but that there was an account that had been sent to them. So really great from a redundancy standpoint to ensure that not only was the account up and running, but if they didn't get it done, we weren't struggling ourselves to quickly log in the morning and reset their password. So I mentioned we're running a couple different scripts here. So why did we choose this route versus just one singular script that did everything? For a couple reasons. First off, if a script happens to fail, it's a lot easier to troubleshoot script by script to figure out what portion of that script failed than if you have one ginormous long script and you have to troubleshoot that singular script to understand, oh no, what section of this script was not working, what did and didn't happen. And then secondly, from a control perspective on triggering, different scripts needed to occur at different times. The Jira ticket trigger was 14 days in advance. The password reset was the Friday at 5 p.m. The Slackbot notification was the day after the Jira trigger ran to notify IT. So it allowed us to set a little bit more of a dynamic trigger method between these different scripts. So not only would we be able to troubleshoot them more quickly, but we knew that the script that was needed would run at that specific time. Future integrations. So I left this company and I'm now excitingly at Relay, as you may have heard. We're hiring, so more on that. But from a manual account perspective, the recruiter still needed to go in and add this information to the spreadsheet. So there was still a theoretical scenario of error that could happen if somebody typed in a name incorrectly, or they didn't follow the formatting around their preferred name versus their legal name quite like they did, because it was looking for certain items to happen there. So I got about halfway through this process, and I still hopefully want to find time to finish it at some point, but I was starting to use a Levers API to pull that new hire information automatically and then update it as line items to the spreadsheet. So the nice part there is that recruiting actually wouldn't even need to manage the spreadsheet anymore. As soon as somebody moved to a hired status within Lever, we could capture all of that attribute data and then upload it automatically with a Google script to our spreadsheet and then run that data off of our other Google scripts. So this would have really made this a zero-touch scenario for any team where we knew we had our source of truth that was all automated and nobody would need to touch anything. So that was the final piece that future-wise may come at some point, but hasn't come out yet. Anybody have any questions? We are using Google Workspace.
There you go. Oh, I don't need that. People can't hear you. Oh, okay. No, so you can replicate all this and bring it over.
I definitely could in that scenario. That's
Nice.
right. Yeah.
So now that you've built this like end to end, now with the possibility of you having to redo it, what changes?
Good question. I think being very candid, the biggest change is that the scripts were written with me and ChatGPT, and they're not always the most logical. I know from an automation standpoint, there's some potential areas to clean things up within the scripts. So that's definitely like a future item that I want to tackle, is just making the scripts a little bit simpler and more readable. And then there's also some like weird variables that I did end up editing throughout creation. Like the email logic I gave you of what happens if it's a returning hire versus an existing hire, that wasn't in version 1 of the script. That was me noticing that it created a completely new user for a returning co-op, and I was like, they should probably use their original email. Let's fix this up and change it. Also things like preferred name. Initially, it was just grabbing their first name and last name, but like my preferred name is Chris, not Christopher. So I created logic looking for your preferred name in quotes or brackets within the actual full name field and then said, hey, if we had this name and it's in brackets or quotes, then use this as the first name. Don't use their actual legal name. So there's lots of things that I think can continue to be changed here, but the foundation is set, which is really exciting.
This is very cool. It's like essentially replacing some services like GAT Plus. So I think that's really awesome. Do you have an automated email to turn on 2FA? Because that's usually afterwards, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
I mean, part of our Google Workspace setup was that you couldn't activate your account without some form of MFA. So they were just prompted to do that a part of their account setup. We didn't have to do that. I believe my email did mention, hey, don't forget to set this up and don't use your cell phone, use an authenticator app.
Very cool. Anyone else have any other questions?
No. Cool. Well, I'll leave you with this last thing. Firstly, all of the scripts are public on my GitHub. So if you want a starting point for yourself or your own company, feel free to scan this here or from the recording on YouTube. But there's a bunch of scripts out there and a few others that you could take a look at.
Oh, I have a spicy question. Sorry, I forgot to ask this one. Is the hope to have HR automate all this stuff?
I mean, the honest answer is to have a direct integration with your HRIS system to your Google Workspace or respective IDP of choice. But that's not always a reality from either a cost or a company size perspective.
But the hope is then to essentially have an agent or a script that HR just pushes a button, right?
Yeah, or like a direct connection between those systems. But I didn't have that. We didn't have the money for that. And I'm a big Okta fan. And I was like, how can I recreate that environment myself without having that tool? And it became running a bunch of Google App scripts as a result. So
amazing. Thank you so much, Chris. This has been an amazing presentation. Check out the QR codes.
Yeah. GitHub for all the stuff. There's also a template of the CSV there. So it really gets you started on things to go. If you do download the scripts, there are placeholders for where you need to place your API keys or OUIDs so that you can appropriately sort of get that up and running. And once again, if you're looking for a new opportunity, hit me up. I'm around to chat. I think we've got some cool stuff going at Relay. Thank you.
Yeah. This is a perfect segue for Joe and his Okta and AI workflows.
My slideshow will be cheap and cheerful tonight.
Do I have a copy of yours? I don't think I do.
No, I just did it right now.
Okay, can you airdrop it to me?
Yeah. Well, it is in Google.
It's Google Slides? Okay, so you want to send me the link in Slack?
Yeah. Copy link. There's also some like other I want to extend display. Yay, Tahoe. Okay, I'm gonna pop in here. There you are. Okay, so. Oh, JK, I shared it. Private only to me. Okay, so let me just clean up my stuff here. Desktop 3. Feel free to talk amongst yourselves. Who here uses Okta right now? Just a couple. 3? Great. 4. Oh, yay.
I think Chris wishes he was using Okta.
I really like it. It's a little complicated. Okay. Like I said, cheap and cheerful. No judgment. Safe space. We're also going to do a bit of a live demo. So I'm also going to try to. Well, we'll just kind of do this as we go. So to set the stage, I've been playing with AI for quite some time, and I have when I started at When I Work, I guess maybe hi everyone, I'm Joe. I'm a senior systems administrator at a company called When I Work, and I own Okta and other stuff. I found that as I was on my journey to hoover up all of our integrations or apps and put them into Okta, things got a bit complicated, especially as we moved AWS into Okta and doing group-based permissions. What was working versus what needed to work caused quite a large structural change, and I needed to reflect that in Okta. And the only way I had built things at the time was in the GUI. And if you've played with group rules or if-then statements for that, it's pretty limited. And I found myself needing to operate quickly and accurately and make changes very fast. So let's click here. Let's do this. Google Slide. There we go. Okay, so this is just an example of what was. So this is just for the data team. So, this is just in our sandbox environment, which we'll see in a moment. But if the users department equals data, then give them all that stuff, which is fine when you do it for the first time. And then if you have to change it, you can edit certain things. You can edit the name and the if statement. But when you come to the then area, this stuff doesn't change. It's immutable. So then going and making new groups for each one of the profile types or the permission profiles you need in AWS was quite a labor-intensive thing when you rinse and repeat for like 6 teams. So I just couldn't handle that. And that's what I look like. A bit upset, a bit frustrated, and needing a different way to handle this. So I was using Gemini. I started with ChatGPT, but eventually got to a point with Gemini with its million context window that I was able to start to synthesize or create like a partner to be my sounding board. So I went from just like, hey, Gemini, I want to update a group rule to, hey, I need you to be someone who's a subject matter expert. And I also need, let me see where the next slide is. Maybe it's our team. Yeah, our AI team. So these are all generated from, is this just like, I'll add this to the Slack channel so you guys can see the full artifacts. These are just like snippets about it. But it created Alex Chen, Maria Rodriguez, and then I added sort of this like team dynamic for them, how they interact together to produce a response. But really what I wanted to do or wanted to handle was like my work with AI. I've always, and maybe you guys have experienced this too, sometimes it's wrong, very, very wrong. And so I was like, okay, if I give it the information of like a subject matter expert and like my approach, for this example, the approach of these personas are a little older. I've kind of transitioned to more of an agentic workflow, and we can talk about that too. But in this case, it was like I'm having a conversation, and I want to talk shop with essentially like some of you all. But like, what's easier? I can just do that in Gemini, have a conversation, and hopefully get myself closer to where I need to be. And as it became like these embodied principles that allowed the AI to increase the saturation of its effectiveness, its ability to provide content to me improved over time, or at least in this scenario. And I wanted them to work together. So Alex, in this case, the principal identity architect, is like what and why for every solution. It has some fluff here, like 10 years in IAM on all major Okta certifications, which eventually just became token bloat. But what is helpful to sort of ground the AI in how to operate. It's really good at improv. So you can just say like, and now you're an Okta admin. It's like, oh, I can be an Okta admin. And then Maria, the SRE, like I wanted to design a tool that I wasn't going to then have to redesign in like 3 months when the situation changed. It needed to be repeatable. And ideally, I could give it to another member of my team to use and not have to worry that they were going to blow it away or break something. So their collaboration with me led to, hey, like that. I can make changes and not have any impact. So I'm gonna show a bit of a demo here. Now getting this over here is going to be interesting. What screen am I on? Okay. And also feel free to interrupt. Ask me any questions. AI, Okta, whatever. Let's just do this. So I have this, and then I'm going to grab this over here. Thank you for bearing with me. The screens are so big. Okay, I guess I can't put that there.
Did you have a like AI prompt for all your pictures? Like
No, this one actually I did as I was sitting over there. I was
Nice.
like, I need to see what a frustrated Okta admin looks like and a happy Okta admin, and that's what it came up with. But just to show this first. So in this case, our DevOps team had access via Terraform and pushed many AWS groups. And so as you're sort of trying to build group rules in Okta, you can sure do it manually. But like, say for instance, in that picture I showed earlier, I'm doing pretty well at this from the side. I can't do anything with these. So what do I have to do is recreate it from scratch. And again, rinse and repeat over all those rules. Hopefully you don't fat finger something and then access gets stripped. And then again, kind of like your monolithic explanation is like, how do I find the right group to then assign to the person? So then we get to the wizard. So let's see if I can make this work for everyone. Okay, go down. Give me this. Yeah, cool. Okay. No, I wanted it to be okay, so this is all built in Node.js. Oh, it's okay. It's fine. Okta. Okay, so I have like a little wizard here. And in this case, I might need to dump out to grab the text files. But essentially, I was like, I want to be able to adjust group rule assignments. It does sort of say, like, this is going to touch production. So, like, be mindful. There are some kind of, like, oh, crap things built in for if it doesn't work, it can roll back. You can even do, like, specific access for users, and it creates a manifest file. And you can roll that back if it's, like, temporary. Again, you can use workflows for that as just sort of an extra something that I was just playing with. But for instance, if I wanted to have a look at, maybe I can make this bigger. Yeah, great. So let's say I want to talk about our data team rule, or even engineering. We can do both because it's very fast. I select this. It grabs and shows me what is. And I can go through and say, like, oh, I want to select all. So I can just hit A. I don't want any of these groups anymore. And it says, okay, well, how do you want to add groups? You can do an interactive checklist, like kind of similar to what we saw, which if you're doing 1 or 2 rules or groups, that's fine. But when it comes to this, it's more of it's easier just to provide a text file. So I have that. So let me just provide the path for it. And we'll just add it. And we'll show you what it does. And again, please throw questions my way or curiosities. Nothing off topic. Okay, great. So I'm gonna grab this. Oh, can I do it without dropping it? Cool. So in this case, I just drop this, and I click here in order for it to respond. So some cannot be found. Some of them may not exist because I'm in a demo account. But found 7 to 12 groups from the file. Do you want to proceed with adding them? I do. Rule modification impact, like for me, as Okta became more complex, I really wanted to understand the blast radius of what was going to happen. So I wanted to see exactly what was coming in, what was being changed. Yep, updated automatically. The rule is locked, so that's kind of what I was talking about earlier. You're not able to modify parts of the rule once it's been created or activated, or even after it's been deactivated. It's just locked. So it handles that, and so you can say, yes, I want to recreate it. Oh, recreation canceled. That's not what I wanted. Live demo. Try this again. Data. Yeah, all. From text. Try again. Okay. Come now. Love these live demos. They're great. And now iPhone 18. Come on. How about this? How about I just copy the path? There are other ways. Okay. So, I found the 7 groups. I'm adding them. This rule is locked. I would like to recreate it. Rule workflow failed. API validation name. Amazing. That's not supposed to happen. But really what happens is it does a bit of a stage. The GIF that I had in my mind is like Indiana Jones, like replacing the little golden idol. And what it was doing just moments ago, and I can show you in, that's not what I look like right now. Where is my API error, huh? That's really unfortunate. I am on the Wi-Fi. But really what's supposed to happen is these get updated. They're notated with a date. So the name of the group rule changes. It's appended with a date. And a JIRA ticket is filled with the information of the change, which I'd love to show you and should have just screen recorded over there. But hey, that's great. We can troubleshoot, but I'll get distracted. So I'm already distracted by that not working. Wow. Yeah, questions as I recenter myself? Does that make sense? Yeah.
How often do you have to do this kind of change?
Well, this was more of a. It started off as like just a project. They were going to just change this once, and then we were going to be good. And then it started to be, there's an edge case, or we have a contractor, or we have an incident, and a previous DevOps person needs temporary access. And it was just, I could go and do all the things to get someone to land in the bucket. But like how I had role-based access designed is like, it's not easy to get in here. In production, like the if statement is full of title and department information. So for me to get someone to go back into the full group was not easy by design. So this allowed me to say, I need to give you all these groups. It's easier for me to just throw a text file at you, load that up. I get a manifest. Maybe I have an alert in Slack. I can revert that change, and I can keep going. I don't use it that much anymore because we have had lots of changes, and a lot of the stuff is now sort of like going to be sunset. But yeah, it was a helpful like tool because I was working on sort of scaffolding a new role-based access structure next to what we had, and this was like the version 1 of me doing that. So what it looks like now is more of I use AI in the command line, and I have API access, and I'm just querying Okta on the fly, grabbing whatever I need for context, and then having a conversation to move me closer to my goal while considering the full view of Okta instead of just this one piece, because as things got more complicated, authenticators and IDP integrations and application sign-on policies and all of these things. It becomes so big that it's hard for the administrator, at least in this case, just me, to consider every nuanced bit of little corners and nooks and crannies where, where this was more of a let me work with a sounding board that was those personas and that team dynamic. And now it's, I go out and I ask for agents to go discover what is true based in documentation. And then we talk about our goal, and then we sort of iterate and make changes on that. Does that make sense? Yeah. Any questions? I guess I'm done. Yeah.
Having used Okta in the past, often when these happen, it's due to a reorg, and it's not one group that's changing, but like 50 groups.
Yeah.
Do you have to run this group by group, or can you scope with your text file like a ton of different groups and changes at once?
I'd say group by. I mean, I guess it would depend on how your setup is configured. For me, I was more modular or more granular, so I wanted to keep it like that, just so that I could keep my sanity, and like be really intentional with my action. So if in this, it's the whole goal or intent was like no loss of access, no interruption. So what you would have seen is the rule gets deactivated, the new rule gets created, it checks, it then activates, then you can go check everything. And yeah, it was more for the single act of doing those changes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anything else?
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Final question: are you Team Alex or Team Maria?
Oh, good question. I will say I am more Alex for only the sheer part that Gemini would every time at this point in my workflow, that's 6-7 months ago, every single persona that it would generate would be Alex Chen. So I'm like, welcome back. How are you? But I do appreciate Maria. Like, what I find interesting about the personas is like the principles that they embody are actually the most valuable part. Like for Maria, it's like trust but verify, and then automate. And I've really kind of taken that to heart and use that as like the basis of how I approach my work with AI. It's like, how do I just shift it to the left? All this like shepherding that I do, maybe you guys are familiar with it too. Yes, and okay, but this is wrong, so do it this way. Like that felt like so dumb and like such a waste of time, and so I wanted to find a way to like, how can I just front load all of that and say like, this is how I want you to operate. This is what I don't want you to do. And then like, this is how I want you to work with your other compatriots to get to the goal. And I found it pretty successful. Now it's with the more agentic stuff, it's spin up agents based on the specific task you have, and you're the QA layer, and then bring it to me when you're done. And it's a bit different now, but
I do want to call out that like the most important thing about like if you're doing like a rubber ducky session or something like that, it's still, at least specific with Gemini, you want to give it as much context as you can, in order to get really not like fairly insightful, conversations. Fair,
I mean,
take that with
salt.
Heavy grain of salt kind of idea.
Yeah,
So for folks who are listening, like feel free to try out Gemini, but you really ideally use it in a gem. Put really actually ask Gemini to create context for you when creating a team member. That's probably the most helpful way to do it.
Yeah.
And then that way you can do it. But
yeah, the workflow originally was context heavy, persona creation, then project work.
correct.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Joe. We're just gonna take a quick 5-minute break for those who need to take a stretch break, and then the next we have Cameron.
I'm going to troubleshoot this API.
Cool.
So I'm ready whenever you are.
Is that capturing audio from Keynote? I do have a video on one slide. I guess it might just come through on the.
Yeah.
It's just like a demo reel. It's fine.
And everyone's hearing us right now on the stream.
True,
So
yeah.
They now know. But yeah.
Cool.
It's also a little complicated. It could be fragile.
All right, we're going to get started again. Alan, do you want an intro?
All right, we got one more speaker. This is Cameron, and the topic is AI stuff. So appreciate you guys all, participating. This is the last one. This is what we're here for, all the AI stuff. LLMs. Let's do it.
Cool. Alrighty. Yes, it's called AI stuff. I'm basically going over how I've been using LLMs, just a lot of examples. Some of it is very basic. I will also say that I am very understanding that I am the only thing standing between us and the bar, so I will accelerate through this and move nice and fast. My name is Cameron Kerr. I am the Director of Technology at Take 5 Productions. Take 5 is a service producer. We produce mostly scripted, episodic, dramatic TV shows. If you're on the Toronto Slack, this is me. So if you ever see that little icon, that's me there. I will say too that I have a lot of rules in my industry of when we can and cannot use AI. And so I just want to say right off the bat, the things that I'm going to show you are the things that would maybe interest us. Nothing creative, no generative AI things. I have seen a lot of that stuff, but if you want to talk about it later, you can come find me. But I'm just not going to be talking about that today. I do have a little demo reel that kind of focuses on some of our titles in case you might not have heard of us. Hopefully you've heard of some of our titles.
A chair.
Please don't take her.
A lamp. There's a window with white curtains. Someone is watching. Someone is always watching.
There is something within us. Something sacred. Something special. Something worth protecting.
Silver team, on me.
Please excuse Wednesday. She's allergic to color.
You are here because you are Vikings!
See what you're missing?
We work for Sociopath. I won't be here forever. I'm only the consultant.
We didn't come here. We were brought.
It's true, Mr. President. You can fire the FBI director at any time.
I expect loyalty.
My family came to America on the promise of fair treatment for all. I want to believe that promise.
My job is supporting and kind of managing the tech stack for our post-production team. So these are video editors, visual effects editors, and a small in-house visual effects team that go and make shows like that. I'm going to talk about AI today. I'm going to talk more specifically about the custom tools that I'm writing to kind of help my day-to-day job. Our environment is a little bit different than others. Our end users don't have internet. We are very, very locked down with what we can and cannot do because we deal with some very sensitive content. And so I always like coming to these meetings and seeing all the cool things that people are doing, but for me, I need to do things locally. I need to run things locally. I can't be connecting to cloud services or anything like that. So you'll see a strong theme with that kind of stuff when I show some things. Before we begin, just show of hands. I think I might know the answer, but in the room, who here, like before LLMs, would write code? Hands up? Okay, so a decent amount. Who here, since LLMs, has maybe dabbled a little bit more in code and is writing code? Or maybe you wrote code before, but now you're just going crazy with some GPT stuff. Okay, and is there anybody in the room who doesn't touch code at all and is like, okay, great. I'm going to convert all of you by the end of the day. This is me. I am the type of person who, whenever I get a task, maybe there's some of you out there who are like me, I would rather spend a few hours trying to find a way to automate it or do it as efficiently as possible instead of just kind of doing it manually. This used to take, some time. It's gotten a lot faster with LLMs. I do it because it's fun. I like it when people come to me with a big ask, or maybe it's a manual task that they're doing and I can write a little script or a little app that can automate that for them. For me, one of the most rewarding things is when somebody sees something, one of my tools, one of my scripts, and their reaction is just something like, this is going to save me so much time. And I'm sure maybe some of you are the same way. Maybe some of you are like that for the task that you have to do. This is going to save me so much time. But for me, that's something that I really look forward to seeing from my end users. I have some examples that I'm going to show tonight, and then some findings and some kind of best practices. Some of them are pretty simple and pretty straightforward, but nonetheless, I'll share them with the group. And then we can open it up to Q&A, and knowing our group, it might evolve into a bigger kind of AI LLM discussion. Example number one, we had a situation come up where I needed to troubleshoot and check some of our users who were remoting in from home to access their workstations in the office. Specifically, I needed a way to identify when their home internet ISP was changing the IP address. Residential ISPs will always kind of cycle your IP address, and for this specific thing that we were trying to figure out, I needed a way to detect that. This was kind of before we had a SIM, so I broke open Anthropic's Claude and I asked it to make me a macOS native app that's written in Swift and Swift UI. This is kind of like the end result of that app, but it was quite fun. I have a way to kind of fetch logs automatically from our two very high quality remote desktop solutions. Those are Jump Desktop and Parsec. And I can filter out by show. I've redacted some stuff here. And I can display this information here. It's pretty straightforward. It's a nice little table view or spreadsheet view, but it gives me the information that I need. I also added in some buttons for filtering just to make sure, okay, which users are actually getting their IP addresses rotated around and what are they. Some date filters. And then this nice little fun button that is just like, you know what, I need the actual ISP behind this IP address. So go out to one of these free APIs that will query that and bring it down. And one of the nice little byproducts of that is that I got some free little country emoji as well to make it a little pretty. Now, how did I get here? I can show you some of the prompts that I used to get here, and if you've ever used any of these LLMs to generate code, you might recognize some of these things here. But I didn't have the original prompt that I used to make this app, but this is kind of where we started when I went from just dragging in JSON files to the UI to actually using the API to pull things down. I was very specific with what I was going to give it. I was giving it links to exactly what documentation I want it to look at. I find it's also very good to tell the API exactly, or the LLM exactly what you're going to give it. All right? I'm going to give you some TMITs and API key and where that data is going to result in its existing schema. If you've dealt with code, you can understand that it doesn't always come back the way you expect. Sometimes it comes back broken. Claude, for me, would always kind of inject methods in the middle of other methods and completely out of order, so I might have to clean things up every now and then. Because this was a native macOS app in Xcode, a lot of the errors, little, missing brackets and closing of braces would automatically get caught by Xcode, and we could just fix them there. But some things you might actually have to kick back to the LLM to fix. I find that it's easier to just give the error back to the LLM than it is for me to spend 2 hours trying to troubleshoot this and go down that road. Sometimes it doesn't work, and you got to do it again and again and again until you get it to build and run. And eventually, your app builds and runs, but does it work? No. API issues, and as you can see, some data formatting and stuff like that. And before you know it, eventually you're back at a GUI that works and behaves the way that you want it to. So that's my first example. Example number 2 was actually just a Python script. Specifically, we had one show that we had to deliver in a very specific format, and they wanted all of the delivery files to be organized in a very specific way. We break things up by departments. They wanted things organized by host application. So I needed to tell Claude to write me a Python script to go through, walk a directory on our storage cluster on the network, find all these things, filter them out accordingly, and organize them in the way that the vendor, in this case the studio, wanted. One of the things that we also had to do is ping our project management tool. This is Autodesk's Flow Production Tracking. This is our repository of which visual effects shot and which version was delivered in the show. Make sure that you're grabbing the appropriate version, which is not necessarily the latest or largest numbered version. Sometimes the version that makes it into the show is a different version. But make sure that you're grabbing it all out, and make sure that you filter for a top-level vendor because they want everything at the root to be filtered by the visual effects vendor. Now, why is this coming to me? Why wouldn't a coordinator take on this job? Well, it was a lot of data. From a cold start to a final delivery, I had it done in just under 2 hours. And that was a lot of testing. I explained my environment before, but the prompts and the back and forth that I showed you with Claude before, that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, I really got to make sure that this thing is nailed down tight and working well. I test locally. I then test on a restricted staging area. I then roll it out to a restricted area on the production cluster, do a limited deployment, and then my actual deployment, we have something in our industry called a render farm. A render farm is basically just like a distributed compute cluster. I can send the Python script to it, and it can actually move and actually filter those hundreds of terabytes in no time at all. So that was fun, really made that afternoon easy for me. The third example is actually from a friend and colleague of ours on the West Coast, Maddox. He is the organizer of the Mac DevOps conference. I'm sure many of you know this conference. He and I, because we work in similar industries, we have similar pipelines and similar software stacks. We both use this program for our backups to LTO tape. We have petabytes and petabytes and petabytes of data backed up on tape. This application, ArcoWare P5, has a horrible UI, a very slow web interface, and a CLI tool that really gives back some very bizarre results in some odd formats. But he wrote this nice app with the assistance of Claude to just drag a folder from the Finder on here and it'll just instantly tell you if that's backed up to tape, which I hope that nobody else here is a P5 ArcWare user, because this was like a cold glass in the desert to have this thing as opposed to dealing with, you know, the built-in GUI. So thank you to him for allowing me to share this with you all today. Also, I should say that Mac DevOps is actually heading next June out east. It's going to be in Montreal. So if any of you are interested in that conference, you should definitely check it out. The URL is at the bottom there. This last one I have a live demo of. This is actually a side project that I've been working on. I don't really have a name. I've been calling it Cutlist. This is what an editor's timeline looks like. Every single one of these colored little rectangles is a different video clip. This is the first, I would say, like 17, 18 minutes of Halo 2, Season 2, Episode 1. Every pink file, or every pink little rectangle here, is a visual effects shot. And in our industry, every visual effects shot needs to be tracked. Every state of the edit needs to be tracked. We need to know exactly for this shot, what camera was it shot on, what lens was it shot on, what was the imaging mode of that camera, what was the time code used actually in the edit. But the problem is these edits are always changing. Things are getting shifted around, shots are getting extended or shortened or even omitted. Sometimes they're using different takes. We need to track all of that stuff. Now, I mentioned before Autodesk Flow production tracking. Getting the timeline data into Flow has been a nightmare, and there are shows out there in the world who have entire teams of people that are just moving this data back and forth and updating the visual effects vendors accordingly. I wrote an app to do that, and I'm going to give you a little demo of it now. So this is Cutlist. It's a Swift and Swift UI Mac OS app. Where's my cursor? There you are. I cannot. And if you drag your timeline file on there, it'll automatically parse things into a nice little spreadsheet view. This is great. Now, the other fun thing is if you have a video offline, which I do. Let me see if I can drag that on there. It'll automatically generate your thumbnails as well. So what are some of the things that the editors do with this kind of information? Well, sometimes they just need to export the thumbnails, which I can do. I've already done that, but let me just do that again. And we have, as I'm sure you saw there, some thumbnails, easy peasy. The other thing is we can export a CSV. So some users and some folks out there, they don't use Flow production tracking, and they might just need to import it into a Google Sheet. A lot of FileMaker users still out there kind of ingesting things into databases. So they can do that with a CSV. But for me, I have this Cloud Little upload tool, and you can see a little progress bar down at the bottom where it will automatically go out to Flow, double check, publish these shots there. It'll check if they exist, it'll check if there are any changes, it'll let you know what those changes are, if they are here, and if you have thumbnails, it'll also publish those thumbnails as well. And Flow, this is Flow here. If I refresh Wi-Fi, yeah, hey, there we go. Thumbnails are still processing on Flow server, but you get the idea. All of my data is now here. I can assign shots to vendors. I can assign artists to it. There they are. They'll come in eventually. And all of my data is there in my nice little in my nice little table view. So that is Cutlist. Now, what have been my learnings, my findings, my tips along the way? I don't trust any of these services, any of these LLMs with my data. I'm not even going to be, giving them. I see like there are a lot of apps out there that'll, control your source control as well. If you give it your Git repo or whatever. I will not do that at all. And you might be saying, but Cam, you just showed us this thing where you moved all your files on the file system, and like, what are you talking about? No, I made a Python script that I tested locally and tested in various different ways before I actually rolled it out. I'm not actually giving an agentic app access to my machine in a production environment. I do not trust that at all. There are a lot of examples out there of folks who are using services like this. This is a fun one from Jason Lemkin on Twitter. Replit is kind of an all-in-one coding plus hosting solution for folks who want to kind of vibe code a product. And the agent just deleted his entire production database for his SaaS product, right? Even after had explicit instructions not to do so. I can't have that in my environment. That is not going to fly. This is another one that I found with Cursor. I'll zoom in. I also had to, redact some choice language here, but the same thing. There are, when giving some of these tools controls and local access to local machines and file systems, it can get really, really scary really quickly, and I cannot have that in my environment. One time, by mistake, I uploaded kind of like an environment file into a chat with Claude that had a plain text password in there, and I immediately realized what I had done, stupid Cameron, and I immediately swapped that password out and kind of, destroyed it. Because the last thing that I want is my comment or my prompts to be used as some kind of reinforcement learning for someone else, and then some other user gets a response back from the LLM that is, oh, here's this thing, and here's a sample environment file, and there's my password. And whenever I tell people this, I do see some of you nodding your heads, but when I've told people this to other folks, they say, but Cam, these services, they don't use customer data for like reinforcement learning. They don't use the prompts. They don't, all this data is secure, like it's stored, it's encrypted and whatever. But for me, I can't take that risk. Like, I am not taking that risk. I am fine keeping a nice separation between the actual LLM and my production database. The other thing that I learned is kind of understanding your scale. When I roll out apps and services, I'm in a little bit of a fortunate position that I understand exactly the number of users who's going to be using this. If you are writing something that is either going to be hosted, maybe cloud hosted, going out to a wide distribution, maybe it accesses cloud resources, and you're getting code generated to access those resources, you really, really got to understand your usage limits and what that code is actually doing. This is a quote from the Rework podcast. There's a company called 37 Signals. They make a product called Basecamp. And this is an episode about cleaning up their AWS bill. And one of their users found out that just one extra thing of logging was adding $10,000 a month to their AWS bill. Now, there was another moment in this podcast where I think they were doing some S3 to S3 replication, and the code that was doing that replication wasn't written efficiently, and when they rewrote that code, they were able to take a $13,000 a month line item down to $15. So understand your scale. Now, full disclosure, this episode came out in 2019, so the code in question is not LLM generated code, but the reason why I like showing it is because even if, very good professional application developers can make mistakes like this and balloon cloud costs, you bet that the LLMs will too. So be very cognizant of that if you are deploying at scale or using any kind of cloud resources. I used to hate unit tests. I thought that they were a waste of time. Unit tests, for those in the audience, are code that you write that tests your code. to make sure that everything is behaving, so that when you make changes, you can run the tests and make sure that everything is behaving as it should. But I decided to write my unit tests using the LLM as well. And you might be thinking, like, wait a minute, Cam, you're using LLM-generated unit tests to test your LLM-generated code? It's like, yeah, I am. But I'm also going through and making sure that it's actually behaving the way that it should. I would rather have the LLM take me to 80 or 90% of the way there and then have me bring it home than have no tests at all. If you are doing things that you need 100% factual accuracy, then yeah, you're going to have to double check the outputs of these LLMs. But thankfully for code, a lot of times it works or it doesn't. And if you did the testing, then it's actually working right or it's not. LLMs are famous for making things up. Many a time I will be looking at code that was generated and go to build and run it in Xcode. And Xcode will just look at me and say, you know what, I'm pretty sure I know what AV Foundation is, and that method doesn't even exist because the LLM just, made it up or hallucinated it. Sometimes it's okay because this is part of the debugging process. You're going to be going through, you're going to be changing it anyway, and you're going to be testing it as well. In my experience, it's very easy for the LLMs to get kind of carried away, and before you know it, you have one huge content.swift file that has like 40 different classes in it and is just a massive, massive file. Starting a new project, I like kind of giving it scope and giving it a plan and telling it how I want it to break things up, because not only does that help your token limits instead of feeding a huge file through the LLM each time, but it actually breaks your project up into much better pieces that are easier to manage. If you are a non-programmer, I strongly recommend even just watching kind of like a 2-hour video on YouTube about the basics of whatever language you're kind of going to be working in. It can really go a long way. There have been some times where I'll get something back from the LLM that's just like, oh, okay, like, I see what you're trying to do here, but it's an off by 1 error. I'll just fix that manually. Or, this type is not the input that this method expects, but I know how to convert that type, so I'll just do it manually, etc. Now, you may be thinking that everybody should just become programmers, and I'm not. In case if you were wondering, I made this an optional. That's a Swift joke, by the way. But it does help, especially in cases like this if you have a base understanding. And if not, that's okay, because whenever you encounter an error, you can just spit it back into the LLM and kind of learn that way as well. But for me, it's certainly helped. I found that if you're going to get started with writing code, it really helps to start with something that you already know how to do, something that is small in scope, something that you can kind of keep contained so that you can kind of check it and you can understand how these things work. I wouldn't want to bite off more than I can chew on your first go, but at least this will give you kind of an area to kind of learn and get started. And that's it. That's kind of what I have learned. I'm sure a lot of you have kind of had similar experiences, but these tools are pretty incredible and can speed things up, and yeah, that's all I got. Thank you.
How has your approach to using these tools evolved as you've learned? So, like, I don't know if this is like a chronological timeline, but the apps that were considered like the 1.0 of you using LLM versus the 3.0, how does your approach differ now?
I've really restricted my asks of the LLMs to very specific compartmentalized things. I have also like that cut list app, I've rewritten it like 3 different times just from scratch. Just because, there's a lot going on there under the hood, and it can get to a point where it's just like, refactoring this is going to be more of an undertaking than just writing it from scratch. And I know where it's getting caught up. I know what to look out for the next time around, and it's just easier to kind of start with a much more detailed plan and kind of go again. Thankfully, I think about on the third time through that more detailed plan and that outline was hopefully the last time that I rewrite this thing. But yeah, before I was just, it didn't matter. I was just throwing the whole Xcode project in there and just being like, here's everything, like have a look at it. And I found that the results just weren't as good as just focusing on one data structure, one model, and one method or a couple classes.
Yeah, I find like the what I always get it like, it's like role-based access control, least privilege, like you're only able to do this one thing and thank you very much. And then also you can't, just in case, you also can't do these things. Just in case like what I said you could do wasn't clear, you also can't do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is more a group-based question, but I noticed when I coded, I used ChatGPT. When Joe coded, he used Gemini. When you coded, you used Claude. What made you decide on one LLM versus another LLM?
At the time, Claude I found was the best for Swift, and I was making native Mac apps. These things are changing so fast. Like yesterday, right? Like Gemini 3 comes out, and now there's like Anti-Gravity, which appears to be Google's fork of VS Code with their, planning and agentic side as well. So at the time, I used it because it was the best. Is it still the best? I don't know. I do like in Xcode 26 that the integration is right there now, so I don't need to hop back and forth as much. But for me, it was just, I would, put these things against each other. And I think if Cursor 2.0, you can actually do that. You can have an ask, and you can say, all right, I want to use Sonnet 4.5 I want to do one at Sonnet 4.5, one at Composer, which is Cursor's kind of model, and one using this LLM, and you can get all the results back in parallel, and you can pick and compare and see what the differences are, and choose a path that way. It was basically just it was better at Swift.
And then my follow-up question to this: you talked a lot about testing your LLM creations.
Yeah.
Would you test them in the same LLM that you created it in, or would you actually feed it to a different LLM to remove any theoretical bias on the fact that it just created it versus another one is reading it for the first time?
When I do my tests, I did do them all in Claude as well because they are kind of Xcode tests, so they're also written in Swift. But I kind of knew the result that I was expecting, and I knew all of the test files that I was going to be giving it. So, I mean, that's any unit test really, right? But I hadn't really thought about that. Maybe. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
More of a statement than a question, but I found comparing like different models against each other when you're writing something really helped. And I find quite often I'm testing one, I'll use one agent to write it, and I'll throw it another one without giving it any context. So just look at the script. Do you see any problems? Tell me what it does, and let it come back. And quite often it'll come out with a different answer than what I was trying to get the first agent to create. So then you can go back and get the two to modify together. By finding getting another one to look at it, really, it helped a lot with me getting things working.
Yeah, especially with the big ones. And they get out of control, and you're just like, I don't know why it made that function, but it did, and it works. Yeah, but it's just like, I'm pretty sure I understand 90% of this function, but like, I don't understand this part. Like, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, also just to add on to that, like I found that, so I have ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini. And what I have found really helpful is initiating a critique and debate where I say, hey, Gemini, or Claude, whoever just made the code for me, critique and debate why you've created this. Tell me why. And then I would then do the same thing in the other models. Then it would just rip it apart. And what I had found was the responses that it gave actually were really helpful in learning, one, the biases for each model, and then two, like how I needed to change my thought process. Because again, like earlier about the shepherding, you get to a point where you're like, oh, critique and debate, okay, cool, but like I feel like there's something here. What are you assuming? Like, what are your assumptions based on like what you've gathered for me? Because I find that it, like especially Claude, makes a lot of assumptions and kind of just go to town on whatever it is. And I've really found that to be a nice leash to keep Claude from just like being too thoughtful. but yeah, the critique and debate has been really helpful. Yeah.
What tape? So we deal with a lot of data. We're backing up mostly to LTO 8 and 9. So we get about, and this is we can't compress our data, so it's on the LTO 8 tapes, we get just over about 11.5 terabytes per tape. They're like a little square, kind of like this big. Yeah. Yeah, sorry? We have a 160 bay tape library with 6 LTO drives in there. We work with a lot of data. We have 0 cloud presence, right? Because for us to even like the cheapest archival Glacier thing, it's like, oh, that's a $78,000 a month bill right there. Or I can put it on 2 tapes for one fixed cost, keep one off site, keep one on site, and get protected that way. So yeah, it's a little bit of a different world. Cloud is very expensive for our industry.
Oh, I have more, but yeah. So like, you're starting you're gonna rewrite Cultist again, Cutlist. You're gonna rewrite it. How do you start? How do you prime? How are you starting? Not from scratch, but from, you know what I mean? Like
yeah. So the planning stage is really critical, and kind of like I found getting the LLM to give you the outline. Like, this is what I am building. I'm building a native Mac OS app. I want to write it in Swift and Swift UI. This is what I want the app to do. These are going to be the features of the app. How would you, LLM, structure the data model accordingly, right? I know what I want in the end, but I'm also kind of like curious as to what it initially thinks. And because I've done it so many times, I can also, as I'm going through, it gives me an outline. I can then, check off those items one at a time as kind of like my little compartmentalized conversations, and kind of achieve things that way. But I also have my previous versions to pull in and say, compare this against this version. Like, what are the differences? Which one would you do better? And it's just like, oh, this one actually. For example, I have logic in the app to change the number of simultaneous network calls, whether you're on an Ethernet connection, which all my users are, or whether you're on a wireless connection. That is something that it might not think of right off the bat, but because I've already done it in the previous days, like, oh, okay, that might be something to consider. The planning, like, I would spend a lot more time planning and kind of breaking down every individual to-do and task up front, because then I also have like a to-do list and an outline. But I also found that the LLM really works well once it has that guide.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, like kind of like what we talked about, all the context up front.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Any other questions? All right, I think that's a wrap. Thank you so much, Cameron.
Thank you.
I know this is quite a long overall session, but I really want to thank everyone's time and participation and all the thoughtful questions. Just a couple of housekeeping things. Just please tidy up after yourselves, and can we get a picture? I think we always do a picture, right? Yeah. Yeah, Jim likes to do a picture. So if everyone could just go to the front, maybe I'll throw the slide deck on for our. And